Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Jack Lowden to talk all about slow horses. And starting off, going back to when you first took on the role of River in the series, I've heard you kind of describe how the first day that you showed up to play him on set, that you obviously had a foundation and certain ideas of how you were going to play him, but at the same time, there's that excitement of the blank canvas a character's going to be and ideas that you maybe haven't tried yet to kind of see how it feels. And I was just interested in looking back at that experience of that first day and really kind of finding how you were going to fill in a lot of the spaces for who he was ultimately going to be for these last few seasons.
Yeah, because it's sort of been bizarre that I've played a lot of real people, a lot of people that some are dead, some aren't, and but I there's quite a canvas there already for you, and I before River I wasn't given a lot of opportunities to play people that were completely made up, which sounds bizarre as an actor, but I really did. I've played a lot of real people, um, so sort of copious amounts of research and deciding how much to mimic someone or not. So with River, it was completely fictitious. And that was genuinely the most daunting part of it for me, which is a weird thing to say. So I had absolutely no idea what really River was going to be. I mean, the writing gives so much. All I knew was that there was many attributes that he had on the page that I think I share, and I found very accessible. And I'm probably trying to put in a lot of parts. I had been trying to put in a lot of parts before that as well, particularly his sort of his sarcasm and his cynicism. Um, comes incredibly easy to me. And so no, I had no real idea. And so to look back, what are we on now? Number five, and think how much he's sort of progressed. The wonderful thing about the long form thing, which I've never done, is exactly that, is you just sort of sink further and further and further into the character in a sort of comfy jacket kind of way, where it everything just gets a little bit easier, and then and then you challenge yourself a lot more, so it's really been fantastic.
I also love the way that you've talked about the tone of the show because it's such a beautifully specific tone that the series has. But obviously, again, at the beginning, it's not just you figuring out what is the tone from the page, and Will Smith is a writer and the director. It's also everybody on the cast kind of going on that journey together. And so, what was that space like as all of you were figuring out how that tone was going to feel once you started filming scenes together?
Well, yeah, I mean the tone was the hardest thing with this, because it's it's life and death. It's the world of espionage and secret services and people protecting the public, which is an incredibly serious subject when you think about it. But the writing, you would basically tries to capture these people on their off-duty moments, or try and frame them just like people at work who have a terrible boss or dreadful working environment or work too long hours, and something that we don't classically associate with the world of espionage. Um, so there was these two worlds rubbing side by side that none of us really knew what to do, to be honest. Nobody sat down and sort of went, "This is going to be the tone." Um, it just sort of evolved, primarily probably led by Gary, and led by that role, who's just this sort of juggernaut in every room. And I found it evolved very quickly as soon as I got to do scenes with Gary. The sort of the tone and how I could be useful to Gary, and therefore the story and the tone really developed as soon as we started working together. Yeah.
And obviously, with River, so much of what's driving him is that relationship that he has with his grandfather and that idea of family legacy.
Mm.
I know you've mentioned before that obviously the books kind of go even deeper on that. And I was interested in how that was really foundational in you kind of getting into the depths of River, and how you feel like you've wanted that relationship and that kind of need to live up to the idea of family legacy to evolve and shift a little bit over the seasons as well.
Well, I think that that's another gift of this role, is that there's more than one focal point for River. There's more than one person that he wants to impress, or wants to love, or whatever, or wants to be loved by. And he has different relations. There's Lamb, and then there's his grandfather. he holds one in such high esteem, the other one he sort of wants to headbutt at any given moment. Um, so it's just another thing that gives you different ways of playing certain situations. There's sort of this split loyalty, which is really wonderful. And even the subject of sort of nepotism, being in the world of espionage, sort of being a nepo baby, so to speak, um, as a spy was it's just really really interesting, and how much that's like people beat him over the head with it. So again, when working with Jonathan Pryce, it's sometimes I get struck. It's mad sometimes when we talk about this show, and I talk about other characters, and it's the people that are playing them, and it's kind of like this Real Madrid kind of galactical cast that I've just been gifted into, which is really wonderful. Yeah.
It's fantastic, and with that idea of there's multiple people now that he's trying to impress, and kind of starting with that idea of Lamb and the way that he'll be like, I got into the park, I did this, he still kind of always wants to share his successes, knowing that he's just going to be shot down and disparaged every time he says anything. I was interested in the space of how you went into a character like River, and okay, if he really wants to kind of get the admiration and get that approval and have someone say great job, but he's never getting it, how does he respond when he has situations like that? Or Taverner literally saying to his face, I wish you'd never happened.
Yeah. Having Kristen Scott Thomas say that to you, I think everybody should experience that at some point in their life. It's kind of like a cold shower. It's really wonderful. Just to have Kristen Scott Thomas look at you like you're muck on her shoe is really wonderful. It's invigorating. Um, but yeah, it's he. I think it's important as well for River, and I think for everybody to sort of realize, that whole old adage of not caring about what people think, and he really cares about what people think. And it's interesting to sort of push him further to sort of let that all drop off, which is something that some people are blessed with from birth, and some people it takes their whole lives to actually go, oh, I really shouldn't have cared what people think. Um, so I hope he continues to not care, but I can't see it happening anytime soon. No,
Same.
I
It also
know.
feels like the stakes of season 3 was such an interesting space for him, because it was such a different type of mission. It was one of our own is in trouble. And so that level of protectiveness, particularly, now that he has started to develop relationships and friendships, and a sense of trust with the people around him. And so how did the kind of like thesis and idea of what that mission was, and the fact it was much more personally connected, change things a little bit for you?
Yeah, I think it's always difficult with someone like this, um, because essentially, I think one of the great things about Slow Horses, but it can also be quite a hindrance as well, is that all the characters, most of them are innately selfish
Yeah.
and sort of self-obsessed. They're very individualistic. Um, Nobody seems to do anything for one another, and if they do, it's reluctance. But I think that's part of the show's brilliance, and actually makes everything. Whenever there's rare moments that people do something for one another, um, they hit a lot harder, and it's a lot more moving. And I think that's why I fell in love with the scripts and River, is that I sort of come from that atmosphere, sort of being from like it's where I grew up in Scotland. It's very you're very like it's very it's sort of shy and sort of standoffish Scots, I find. And they're not quick to love Scots. They're not quick to show love. Um, so I found that quite easy, and I find it so moving when somebody says, you're all right actually, and someone out the corner of their eye, rather than somebody that's just constantly flowering all over you.
No,
Yeah.
and a great example of that is the scene in the car with Louisa, where, she kind of like, he allows her the space to just vent and insult him, and he doesn't retaliate on it. And then when he awkwardly tries to kind of like give her a sideways hug in the car, but he doesn't really know how to do it properly. Did you want that to kind of land in a place where it kind of almost feels like humoristic, because it's just so outside of both of their comfort zones in that moment?
Yeah, because there's a tendency in drama to sort of write uh the perfect ending to a moment. A lot of people write from a place of what they wish would happen in life. So what's quite fun with this, and it's already there with Will, the writer, is to think, what is the most human way for someone to talk about somebody who's like lost someone, and sometimes that is people, which is quite a usual thing when someone suffered from loss, is that people don't actually know what to say at all or what to do, and they panic. And so I was really happy that we got the scene to that place where he just doesn't know. He's probably making it worse, but he's well intentioned. He's definitely on the side of the angels, River.
And there's also kind of that connective thread for him in that moment, because he talks about the fact that he feels like he's losing his grandfather and he's in that process. And even though he's still alive, he can see his memory starting to go, and he can see the journey of where that's going to take him. And so how do you feel like that started to open up the idea of dealing with grief, but dealing with grief and the idea of loss for someone who's still physically there at the moment?
That thing in particular is something sort of personally, and I know a lot of people do. You know, as somebody my age with their parents or grandparents, it's something that a lot of people fear happening. Death is one thing, obviously, but watching someone literally sort of disappear in front of you over a long period of time with things like Alzheimer's is I imagine horrible, and I know it's horrible from people that I know. So I really love that is being explored in Slow Horses of all things, and we've done 4 and we're shooting 5, and that keeps developing, and it's really really heartbreaking and horrible. So it's quite sort of strangely sort of preemptively cathartic if you think about it in that kind of way to sort of prep yourself for that. That's the wonderful thing about acting, that you put yourself in situations that you may end up in and you hope not to be. But yeah, but maybe in real life nobody's sort of running in with a cappuccino after each time or driving you home.
And you
Yeah,
were bringing up Will Smith, the writer of the show, and I love the fact that he comes from that Armando Iannucci space, and so
yeah.
it sounds like he's not precious about the words on the page, and it's so detailed with what you get in the scripts for this show, but also there is that freedom and that space to kind of play around in the moment. And so what's the space that in turn gives you as a performer, as you're kind of, especially as you're leaning deeper into this character several seasons in?
It's everything really. It's what all creative environments should be. Is the best idea should win. It's not who has it; it's the best idea. And I think we've bred that atmosphere in this very well, and it's all comes from Will. And definitely when we did the first season, I was a lot more sort of towing the line, so to speak. But I was still trying to figure out and get everything from the script. And then when you start living in the character a little bit longer, you have ideas of your own. And Will is just fantastic, and the other actors. Jonathan's very good for that with me. Jonathan will just chuck little things in. Gary and I do it all the time. Gary and I, try and do. Gary and I sometimes our ideas are ridiculous because it just makes us laugh, and they quickly get sort of swept under the carpet because we just get a bit excited. But that's all part of it. And you work with loads of writers or directors who think that what they've come up with is the greatest thing in the world, and that's an important thing, I think, to have somebody single-minded in a single vision, and sometimes it makes shooting a lot quicker, and there's less sort of toing and froing. But if you can balance it with the best idea in the room, that's the best way to go, really. Yeah.
It is, and with River as well, one of the things that I was curious on your take on with him is just the idea that it's quite an isolated career and space to pursue. We don't necessarily see him kind of going down the pub on a Friday night with friends, because he doesn't really have the ability to share his day to day with the world around him. And so what's the space that you feel like that's taken a lot of his relationships and interactions with people over the years?
Yeah, I think it was a very important thing. As we began this, we spoke to an ex MI6 officer, and one of the most fascinating things he was talking about was how the loneliness of it and the paranoia of being in that world. You can walk through a train station and you're sort of convinced that everybody knows that you're a spy. You're just that paranoid. It's kind of like it's sort of like your fly being down. You think everybody can see that fly's down. My belt is broken, and nobody does. Nobody cares. that you become so paranoid and wrapped up in that world. And he told us so many people in the world of espionage and the secret services are, they suffer from alcoholism. There's a huge suicide rate. There's some real, and you believe it. You believe it because of the secrets they have to keep in the lives that they lead. So I'm not surprised that they're all such a mess. They're all such a mess. I don't know if they would all. I think they would be the worst people to go down the pub with. I think they would just be very brooding. They would want to sit alone all the time, But then, my God, would things come out if you did get a drink in them, But again, they have to be so careful with that. I'm pretty sure he said they only really drink with other spies. Imagine that. That'd be cool. That'd be very
That's a
cool.
table I want to overhear at the pub.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh.
and with a conversation like that and kind of that being such a common thread, what do you think the psychological toll is that it's kind of gradually starting to take more and more on River?
Yes, I think it's starting to take a toll on all of them, and that's what's really wonderful about this is you are watching people sort of disintegrating over their job, and particularly it's so fantastic that it's people that are like in the very bottom division of the industry that they're in, and yet they still have this hope of getting back to where they should be, and it rips them all apart, and it's making them sort of husks, all of them. Um, yeah, I love that you picked up on that because it's something, as we're shooting number 5 now, it's something that's sort of they're all getting a bit tapped. They all want to tap out. It's really horrible, actually. Yeah.
And with some of the other conversations that you had with people working in that field before starting the show as well, I've heard you say that one of the other common threads was that idea that a lot of people that get into that, it's because they're very frequently the smartest person in the room. And what this show does that's so fascinating is, well, what happens if you take a group of people who are all used to being the smartest person in the room and put them all in a room together? And I think for River, he especially feels like he's still the smartest one in the room, even out of that whole
Yeah.
group.
Oh my
And
God.
so how do you feel like that shapes a lot of him?
Oh, hugely. His arrogance is the most fun part of him, and his that it's right. That's what that guy talked about. Is that the main reason that a lot of people get into it is because they enjoy being the smartest person in the room. They don't see the point unless they are, and that sort of the information that they're given and what they're given access to just helps them feel above even the sort of the general public. And I loved how sort of frank that was. Um, and you definitely see that through all of the slow horses. I'd love to see a slow horses pub quiz team. I'd love to see that. Or like they should do like a school sports day, maybe like an egg and spoon race. But yeah, they're just fascinating creatures. They're fascinating creatures because they don't have anything else to lose when you're right down there. You have nothing else to lose. Which is what makes it so romantic when they actually end up helping the world. Yeah.
And that idea of his arrogance as well that you were touching upon, it feels like that's also part of what feeds into the cynicism and kind of like the dry humor and quips that he makes as well a lot of the time. And so how did you want there to be like an arrogance in his humor and in that cynicism? Because even down to the fact, I love that you've kind of described how he'll run somewhere really fast and then he'll stop to roll his eyes a lot in a lot of situations.
Yes, a lot of yeah, that's it's quite kitsch, that, but a lot of when people ask me about River, I do say that he's just one big eye roll. Um, because and it's really useful, those sort of broad brush strokes. I was actually shooting a scene today, and it's a situation that no one would ever find themselves in, and he's sort of going about it with his usual sort of cynicism, like he's seen it all. Everybody else would be in panic, but he just doesn't like that it's not going the way that he wants it to go. Um, yes, his arrogance is a really, really beautiful thing. It's so strangely honest, people that are that arrogant. It's really upfront. It's I love it when somebody's that sort of arrogant. It's so comical. It's brilliant.
It's such a great character on screen as well. And it's also fascinating in how it plays into the way that he responds when he makes mistakes, because all of them make mistakes at various points. And, I think season 3, that whole thing of, oh, I thought you really needed my help, but you were actually just playing me the whole time. And it feels like he doesn't recoil from those situations, that he just throws himself even harder headfirst into the next thing. And so how did you want the arrogance kind of again to play into how he responds to mistakes?
I wanted him to do it in a way that, because I've studied. I grew up on comedy. I didn't purposely study it. I just became obsessed with it. Um, and there's so much rope comedically in somebody that thinks they're always right, and doesn't quite, and is always the last person in the room to see what they're doing is wrong. That sort of pig-headed sort of Napoleonishness about him is really wonderful. Um, and just the sort of the tennis matchness of Will's writing as well is so important in that there's always a comeback. I'm always amazed that scenes finish because there's always a comeback. Like someone has to give up, or like a car has to crash, or a building has to blow up for a scene to finish, because they would just keep going back and forth. They're so smart, our smart mouth. It's really fantastic.
It feels like also when you do scenes with Gary Oldman, that there must be that tennis match element of just the back and forth with the two of you as well. And I think especially because the two of you come from such a theater background, and so even just that judiciousness of how you work with your lines and kind of both come in so prepared. And how have you found that having that similar background and stage experience has really infiltrated into the way that you work together on screen?
It's my favorite. It's honestly my favorite thing about working in this country, is that, once you get to a certain level of something like this, a show of this level, is that most of the actors have huge stage pedigree, and it's not a coincidence. It's because it's sort of bred into us, them, or the sort of work ethic and the preparedness, and it means that we turn up on set and everybody is uber prepared, um, and know how to be part of a company as well. And with Gary in particular, I was never lucky enough to see any of Gary on stage, and I regret it. I wish I could see him. I'm trying to convince him to go back on stage, but it's it makes such a part of it in this country. Other jobs that I've done, you can almost tell or smell a stage actor a mile off. They know how to slot in. They know how to serve a piece or a moment. They're best actors in the world. Yeah.
I also want to talk about one of the physical aspects of River, and that's his run. Because I've heard that you
Mm.
and James Hawes, who was directing episodes early on, kind of actually did some specific work on how he was going to run. Because overall, the way that he dives into things head first, it still has to feel realistic that, this is just an average civilian that's gone through very specific training, and it feels an attainable level of physicality. It's not suddenly like Mission Impossible style stunts in the show. And so how did something like even just the detail of a run really kind of shape a lot of the physical side of him?
Yes, that's good. Yes, he needed to look attainable, because I normally look like a Greek god, so I had to like really work on that. No, no, no. Yeah, particularly with his run, I think, as someone who's 6'1", the first director James did have it was a real sort of bee in his bonnet that my run was a bit too expressive, and so I had to sort of tighten it up for camera, which I still find really hard to this day. But it's a joy when you actually get it right, and I do understand and appreciate the difference. I now watch playback when it comes to running. I've got a real thing about it now. And I did something else this year, not slow horses, when I had to run, and I was like, I've got to watch that back because I've got to get that right. Yeah, you've got to.
Because this is the first time that you've had the opportunity to spend so many seasons with the same character as a recurring role, with that space of kind of comfort and confidence, even going back to what you were talking about at the beginning of finding the tone at the beginning being really difficult, but now that's a space that everybody feels really comfortable playing in. How do you feel like you've really grown in your self-confidence as an actor through getting to play this character and constantly come back to him?
Massively. My self confidence is always something I've struggled with. I've never really possessed self confidence. I've only really possessed it on stage because that's what I sort of grew up doing. But this has helped me in so many ways, and that is my favorite way that it's helped. Is that my main aim as an actor has always been to just get better and to be better at what I do and learn and improve, add different things. And I'm nowhere near the same actor that I was 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was when we started this. Um, I'm a lot braver. There's a lot less things that I sort of think or worry about or plan out or anything. I turn up a lot less prepared in many ways. I don't turn up as over prepared. But that's because of the wonderful atmosphere of this set and the actors I get to work with. Yeah.
And one of those elements as well is, when you're working in the theater, there's that constant fear of, if I forget my lines, if I forget my lines. Do you feel like you have a different relationship even just with the scripts at this point?
Yeah, I never, when I'm on stage, I never fear that I'm going to forget my lines. I don't know why. But that's because I now know, sorry, I know why now. It's because you do 7, 8, 9 weeks rehearsal. It's so in your body. And that's something I struggled with as when I moved onto screen, was that it was sort of, one, two times and then you do it. But it's just changed me as an actor forever. It's brilliant. I haven't done stage for what I'm going to do a play in August for the first time in about 6, 7 years. So I wonder what that's going to be like. I'll probably like turn up not really knowing my lines. Be like, no, we'll just make it up. We'll make it up. No, yeah,
It'll be like riding a bicycle.
yeah. Hope so.
Well, thank you so much, Jack. I love this character and everything that you've brought to him, and I'm so excited that we already know we're going to get more seasons of it. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. Thank you.